thank you all for coming. I know we've got a very diverse group. We want to thank, first of all, TCF Bank for being our presenting sponsor for this Impacting Business Luncheon Series. We have Ann Kelly here that's with us from TCF Bank, and I think we've got Simon and Sam are all here with us from Chemical Bank. Chemical Bank has been great to work with. Anything that you guys need, they're here to answer any questions. Just hook up with them, and they'll be more than happy to either help you themselves or connect you to the right people that can help you. Keep them in mind for your future business needs also. Today, we're all gathered here today, and I did not write out a formal introduction. I figured he knows more about himself than I'm going to be able to say, so I'm going to let him introduce himself. But let me tell you what I did find out about Mike Kuko. He's the co-founder and chief executive officer of PM Environmental. But on top of that, everybody that I have come in contact with, everybody that I said his name in front of, or anybody that's called and said, oh, you've got so-and-so coming, let me tell you, let me tell you what a great guy he is. How he's accessible, he's resourceful, he gets the job done. There isn't anybody that I have talked to that has not sang his praise. And for all of you that are doing any type of real estate investment or have people that you're working with that do that or need that, that is definitely, PM Environmental is definitely the organization that you want to be calling and that you want to have refer people to. Having said that, I'd like to introduce Mike Hooker to come up and tell us a little bit more of himself and get going with the presentation.
This is Faye Bader, and I wanted to thank Faye for allowing me this opportunity. I probably don't need this. I speak pretty loud, and I walk around a lot and use a lot of semantics. And so I appreciate those of you who made it through this really significant storm, and thank God my kids are safe at home and didn't have to endure this. First of all, I want to just say I've worked in this community, and it's so great to hear all those kind things. I've been involved with the community for over 25 years, and I've been involved with fundraisers with Lebanese American Heritage Club, which has a new name, and I always forget it, and the Islamic Center. I've been to some services. Hassan Osman, his son, passed a year ago. It was a very dear friend of mine I've worked with for over 25 years. He's supposed to be here. I'm glad he's safe. He has 4 kids, I'm sorry. And then I want to also say, if any of you are wondering if I didn't take a shower today, I'm Catholic and it's Ash Wednesday, so these are ashes. It's not dirt. I wasn't cleaning my chimney. So anyways, I'm going to go through this kind of quick because the front end is just kind of an overview of due diligence, and then I get pretty heavy into the weeds about how incentives work. So again, that's me, 30 years experience. Wow, I have the same out for that. Look at that. That's what I look like without ashes. I'm going to go over all these things. And please ask questions. I talk pretty fast, and I'm trying to provide as much information for you to be thoroughly confused, to think you need to call me if you have an opportunity. How did we get here? Where did environmental come from? So, Love Canal, if any of you are in your maybe late 40s-ish, you might remember this from when you were a kid. I remember it, back when we had 3 TV channels, and I don't think we could afford a color TV, so I think it was black and white. And I did ABC, NBC, CBS, that was it. But this was all over the news. It was a canal that was dug to try to connect a couple of Great Lakes. It failed, and so a chemical company, Hooker Chemical, filled it with drums, covered it, and it turned out to be great real estate to build the subdivision. All the people drank groundwater, drank chemicals. There was very high cancer rates. Value of the drums is another one. This became more and more common in the 60s and 70s, and in 1980 they passed CERCLA, which is known as Superfund. That's what created our whole industry. This is just kind of a timeline. We really didn't have much for environmental regulations up until in the 60s and 70s. We had some like the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, and they just said I can't directly dump a drum into open water. It didn't say I can't pour 500 drums out the back 40 and bury them. Now, the Valley of the Drums, this was a site over 100,000 drums over 23 acres. It caught on fire in '66. It took a week to put out the fire because there was all these drums that were full of, volatile chemicals. And so after they put the fire out, you know what they did? Kept throwing more drums in there. It was not illegal to dump. It sounds crazy in the '60s that's how things work. So here's our timeline. The reason I say this is we really just emerged in the late '80s, early '90s. There's not many industries as intensive of soil and groundwater construction relation that's in its infancy as much as we are outside of social media and AI companies. So civil engineering, architecture, a lot of the trades involved with real estate development have been around for thousands of years. The pyramids were built 5,000, 6,000 years ago. We're only 30 years old, and that's why there's a lot of variability in the marketplace, and there's a lot of cowboys. So it's a relatively young market. There's no licensing or credentials. People can't believe that. If you do a tax return to the IRS, you got to be a CPA. I'm a licensed professional engineer, but I don't have to be. Any one of you that can document 10 years experience working in environmental can meet the definition of environmental professional, even if you never graduated high school. So it just makes it a real Wild West. And when you hire someone, make sure you know what they can do. Talk to banks that need to have approvals. Talk to lawyers that know who's good and who's bad, because there's a lot of they're not necessarily bad people. They're just kind of cowboys. They're just kind of winging it. The Chamber of Commerces have been around for hundreds of years. We're only 30 years old. So this is why we do a phase one. You want to establish innocent landowner defense, and what that means is if you bought this building and you did a phase one and it didn't show that there was any issues, and the city came through to do some sewer work and unearthed 500 drums with skull and crossbones on it, they would say you have joint and several liability, which means any and all liable parties pay for cleanup, even if ABC Chemical is the one that dumped it back in the 40s. So the feds and the state would come to you and say, you have strict joint and several liability, you need to clean up these drums. You would say, no, I'm an innocent landowner. I did a phase one. I established innocent landowner defense. And that's really the purpose of a phase one, and a lot of people don't really realize that. They think they're doing it because the bank said to do it, and that's really not how it works. This is the DNA of a phase one. Does anyone know what that is? It's a Michigan landmark. SULAX? All right. Usually I ask a bunch of bankers and they have no idea. Civil engineers all guess it. We do a database. We look at aerial photos. So here's a site that's a warehouse and a parking lot. So my client didn't even want to do an environmental assessment. Here's what it looked like in a Sanborn fire insurance map in '53. A bunch of above ground tanks. You can see here. You can see the same features here in an aerial. So we superimpose the legacy structures on the current layout and figure out if we've got a problem. Oops, I gotta go this way. And so, do the prior aerials and structures noted on those figures look anything like it is today? So never judge a property by how it looks today. An office building today could have been a corner gas station 40 years ago. City directories document who occupied the property through different periods of time. After we review all that data, we determine, have those tanks been properly closed? Is there any documentation? If not, I have a recognized environmental condition, and then I have to do a phase two. So this is what we do to collect soil and groundwater samples. This is a geoprobe. That unit and the trailer and the truck and all the equipment that we use, we own 5 of these, is about $250,000. So when you question why a phase two costs so much, that's a pretty expensive piece of equipment, and the people operating it are highly trained and they make pretty decent money. The trades are not low labor. It's not like they're flipping hamburgers. And then the analytical cost is a cost we send to a laboratory. It's usually probably a third or more of our budget. So there's a lot of costs that go into evaluating it. If it's clean, you're good. A little update, DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, is now EGLE, Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. Even though it has virtually nothing to do with regulating energy, it sounds warm and fuzzy, doesn't it? Come on, it's a joke. Liven up. So if you have contamination, you can do a baseline in Michigan. It allows you to buy a property, submit it to the state, and the state will acknowledge you followed the law and that you're not liable for that contamination, provided you follow due care compliance. You know, don't make it worse, don't present your employees or occupants to unsafe contaminants. It's kind of common sense. If you dig up contaminated soil, you know, you got to characterize it and dispose of it accordingly. But as long as you follow all that, you will not be liable. And no other state has this law. And if you think the decade of losing 1 million people is bad as it is, if we didn't have this law, we'd be tumbleweeds. I mean, this is a Rust Belt state, and there is, you know, the Industrial Revolution has deep roots here, and there are contaminated sites just everywhere. Vapors. Has anyone come across vapors in an issue or in a transaction? This is something that's been highly regulated in the last 5 to 8 years, far more than when I first started in my career. You know, this is theoretically what's occurring. There's contaminants that go into a vapor phase, just like when you pump the gas in the summer, you see the little vapors. That's what they think is happening here, and it's going into the building. So the problem with this is that you have previous phase twos that might have been done in 2010, where there were some levels, but they were below criteria. And here's why it's a problem. In 2011, this is perchloroethylene, which is in dry cleaning solvents. You could leave 60,000 parts per billion. 2013, they dropped it to 21,000. In 2017, they dropped it to 6.2. So in a matter of 6 years, you used to be able to keep 10,000 times more contamination on a site, and it was okay. So this creates, and for those in banking, when there's a refi that comes up, someone did all their due diligence correctly 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, their balloon is expired, they got a refi, and now all the good due diligence that they did 5 years ago or 10 years ago, we got a problem. And it really is, it's problematic, and don't shoot the messenger. You know, my accountant tells me I gotta pay taxes. I don't, want to take them out in the back alley. I'd like to take an IRS out in the back alley, but not my accountant. We're just gonna tell you what you need to do. This is how we fix it, and we do this a lot in transactional financing to make banks comfortable with it. It's a vapor mitigation system, and it takes and pulls a vacuum so that the vapors come outside and go through the roof instead of in the building interior. Pretty simple solution. Has anyone heard of PFAS? So they call this an emerging chemical, but really it's been around for decades and decades. Like all good chemicals or bad chemicals, it's great at what it does. So it's great at making things bond to a material. The process of using it, the wastewater, is bad. So why this is such a big deal is, 5 parts per billion benzene, which is in gas, which is pretty low. Well, now we're at 70 parts per trillion. That's a drinking water criteria, and if you discharge to a surface water, it's 12. Makes no sense to me. I mean, I guess we're protecting fish and frogs more than humans, because we can have 5 times more and drink it as a human. But if we put it in a lake or a stream, it's got to be a fifth of that. Logic, throw it out the window. This is just kind of technical stuff in our world, I won't get into that. Here's some headlines on PFAS. This was Adept Plastics, which is the big water tower you see on 96, just east or west of the old Ford Wixom plant. They have astronomical amounts, and this is a client of ours we've been helping. They're getting sued for $3 million. They've already spent close to $3 million on their wastewater treatment process. For a chemical they quit using probably 7 or 8 years ago, and there's just still enough residual. That number is so low, you can have just a little bit of residual and you're gonna hit 70 parts per trillion. I mean, that's like 1 grain of sand in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. That's like virtually nothing. Bad for Michigan, I think, but here's the good news. Brownfield incentives, these are all the things I'm gonna talk about. The Renew Michigan Fund, I bet no one's ever heard of this. Has anyone? So this was passed during Snyder's last lame duck in 2018. This was something the administration was really focused on to try to make the Flint water situation right. And it's $69 million per year to go towards cleaning up all these different legacy issues. And we say legacy, it's, you know, ABC Chemical that went out of business in the 80s, and there's a bunch of contamination. It's not for GM, it's not for Chrysler, it's not for Ford. They're liable, viable parties. They cannot access this fund. So this is pretty good news. There's a lot for PFAS, $28.5 million. So this is good news. You know, and it never made, I sent press releases to Cranes and D-Business to say this is good for the business environment. You know, you guys cover a lot of commercial real estate. I mean, they'll put a news headline about a restaurant selling for $2 million. I'm like, really? That's news, but this isn't? $69 million a year? So anyways, go, you know how they say about the media. So Musta, I cut my teeth in this industry early working on the old Musta fund, which paid for cleanup of underground storage tanks, which is how I became very acclimated with this community, who happens to own a number of petroleum gas stations. So I was working with Comerica, was doing a lot of these gas station loans. The old Musta fund went bankrupt, insolvent in '95, and we almost did as well, but they reinstated this also in a prior lame duck session of Snyder's in 2014. And it's $1 million per release at a gas station. It's got a $2,000 deductible, and then it'll pay up to $1 million if you own 7 or fewer underground tanks, and it's $10,000 if you own 8 or more. So if you're at Speedway, you gotta pay 10 grand. If you're Joe's Service, you pay 2. You only get $1 million per year per owner. So someone like Meyer or Kroger has 20 releases in a year, they only get $1 million for all 20 releases. So it's set up well to not be depleted. It's very well run. It will not go insolvent like the old one did, which was run very poorly. Here's an example of a project. You can see right here, these are Sanborn maps. There was a gas tank. This is in Royal Oak on Main Street. This was an old auto service from 1926. We did ground penetrating radar to try to find that tank. We did find it here. It was in the right of way, not on our property, not our problem, but we couldn't find this one because we couldn't scan this area because there's a bunch of, you know, stuff in here. But we did find, well, there's the outline of the tank in the right of way. And there's the 2,200 gallon tank we found, unbeknownst to anyone. There was no record of it. $2,000 deductible. We removed about $60,000 of soil in 2 days and went vertical. This is now a 4-story luxury apartment building that'll probably be finished, I would guess, in midsummer or the fall. This is another one that's actually in Dearborn. This was a one of these overhead door places. Jan Door is the name of it. And the guy bought it on land contract, did a phase 1, not with us. These were noted, these gas tanks, in the appendices of the phase 1, but they never noted that there was any potential concerns. So they went to a bank to get an SBA loan. The bank noted these tanks. They spent 5 months trying to figure out how to undo what they screwed up. Finally, the bank brought us in. They never even suggested Musta. I got this into the Musta fund in about, I don't know, 7 days. And then we used that as a mitigating factor to satisfy SBA. Great accomplishment. And so if you do a lot of SBA lending, this fund is a great tool. Any questions? Everyone seems attentive.
It's awesome information. Thank you so much.
Am I right? I talk fast?
You do talk fast, but this is very valuable information, just to give you feedback.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I have a question. So if, let's say I had a client, for my client, and they did phase 1, phase 2, there was the vapor, it wasn't an issue then, I'm looking at a refi, I call you, blah, 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 you review it, look at all that. Are they still, let's say they had to get a BEA, are they still protected like an innocent landowner and all that, or?
They're still protected, but they have to implement due care.
But so we'd have to probably do a new due care plan.
Yeah, you would have to, evaluate if that vapor is in fact a concern, and then if it is, you'd have to put in some type of vapor mitigation system.
But they're still an innocent landowner.
They still are, but if they don't implement due care, they can get fines and penalties, and technically they can lose their BEA protection because they're not following their due care.
So you do really want to let them know, like, hey, this is legally.
Yeah, and I have a lot of clients that don't even have a transaction where the state just you know, they're going after every file they can because they don't want to get in a Flint situation and say, we had files that show vapors could be an issue and we did nothing about it to enforce it.
Okay.
So they're really turning the screws, and the Whitmer administration, I don't care if you're right or left, is not going to be kind. I mean, they're really hammering this stuff, and the new director and the attorney general are just out for blood.
So
you
when we
know?
do our annual reviews, it's probably a good idea to check these out.
Yeah, and didn't finish, but I've had clients that just have randomly got letters, not because they're doing a refi, that says, hey, we reviewed your phase 1 BEA from 10 years ago, and you have a vapor issue. Please demonstrate how you're protecting the people and demonstrating due care. And they're like, what the heck do I, you know, I got a lot of clients that did everything perfectly correct, and now they have to spend, you know, $20, $30, $50, $60,000. So it's really, you know, and that's when I'm not the messenger. Most of the time I have to be the messenger and say, hey, this is an issue. Well, how come the state hasn't said anything? You know, God bless you. They're going to at some point. You know, so you can do nothing, but and I don't go and randomly tell people they need to do it, but as it surfaces and I call it nasty grams, you're evil, you didn't do this, you're not protecting. They don't know any better. I mean, who knows this stuff? Did you ever read about vapor regulations in the newspaper, or did they have it on Channel 7 News? Never. Okay, this is another fund that is relatively new, and it's for legacy gas station sites. And legacy, again, that's Joe and Bob's service, you know, contaminated. Joe and Bob died in 1995, and they have this old gas station site that's contaminated. This goes towards those types of sites. There's 5 million, isn't there some people from the city of Dearborn here? At least I saw, okay. So this is for a city to apply for. And then I was going to use this it's Dearborn Heights. There's an old gas station on Telegraph that's just an eyesore. We were going to use this fund, and now they won't support gas station to gas station, but gas station to Starbucks they'll support. So I was able to get the state to cover about $100,000 of contaminated soil removal. This is the Starbucks at Chicago and Telegraph in Redford. Redford's moving on up. They got a Starbucks. So I had another one in St. Clair Shores that was a gas station to an AutoZone. I procured that $250,000 in 5 weeks. And my friend Gus George's former company got the project. There's 4 clients, there's 4 firms that have the contract with the state to use this, and we have it, and I brought it to the state, and then they hired someone else to do the cleaning. I wasn't very happy about that, and I let them know it, but we'll see if they listen. Okay, brownfield, that's the definition in the dictionary. This is the definition under Public Act 381. Contaminated, everyone I think thinks brownfield it has to be contaminated, but that's not the only way. You can be, you know, have contaminated and then pretty blue clean. Functioned obsolete, blighted, and historic qualify. So I'm actually looking at St. Alphonsus that's here in Dearborn.
St. Alphonsus.
Yes, and that's been vacant for a while. If it gets redeveloped, that would be functioned obsolete. It's probably not contaminated. It's probably got a ton of asbestos, but that's a good example of a functionally obsolete. Blighted is, you know, kind of speaks for itself. It's an ugly eyesore. A lot of times blighted sites are functionally obsolete and vice versa. Historic, and if anything is in a land bank, it qualifies as being a brownfield, even if it's just vacant land. What does that mean? It means I'm eligible for brownfield incentives. Brownfield projects typically need to have some redevelopment and an increase in taxable value to take advantage of what's called tax increment financing, known as TIF. This is how it works. You have a base year that the city's collecting their taxes, whether it's vacant land, well, if it's a religious facility, it pays no taxes. So, or if it's a school. So, you know, schools and nonprofits don't pay property taxes. So that base is 0. They change it, convert it into private property. Now it's got new development, and the new amount of value, that's the tax increment. So the taxes generated from that new development, you get reimbursed back to you to recover a number of different expenses, including virtually everything that environmental consultants do. So phase 1, phase 2 BEA, due care compliance. This is a vapor barrier to deal with another vapor issue for a residential property. This is actually that same property I showed you that was just a warehouse in a parking lot. That was a bunch of other stuff. It had a major vapor issue. That site that my client thought was clean ended up having a $1.6 million cleanup. Lead and asbestos surveys, abatement, demolition, so demoing a building, tank removal. The MUSTA fund doesn't cover tank removal, but a brownfield plan will. And then industrial cleaning and solid waste disposal. I do a lot of these 50 to 100,000 square foot industrial buildings that someone turns into a trampoline fun zone or something. And they always have just a bunch of crap in them. Like you need to bring in 10 roll-offs, there's pallets, there's this crap. So all that is solid waste. So that's a recoverable expense. And industrial cleaning, which is, you got a 50-year-old tool and die shop, you got to power wash or sandblast everything. There's oil residue everywhere. You got to clean the concrete. On a 100,000 foot building, that can easily be, $75,000 to $125,000. That's reimbursable. And then core communities, which Dearborn is, and so is Dearborn Heights. Anything that touches Detroit, I will send out a list of the core communities. There's 147 of them in the state. Then you get all these site preparation expenses. These are called non-environmental eligible expenses because they have nothing to do with the environmental condition of the property. All of these categories you would incur cost for if you were developing land out in Pittsfield Township on farmland. So this can be 15 to 20% of a budget, and I will also send you a spreadsheet that itemizes each of these expenses, and when we do projects, we work with our clients to put as much money as we can into each of these buckets. Question to that?
Yeah, Mike, thank you for doing this today. I really appreciate this. I'm sure all of us do. Have you worked with Racer Trust? What are your thoughts on Racer Trust, and how does this impact Racer Trust?
So I'm working on plant 3, 6, and there's one other one. Lansing, we've worked on Willow Run, and I've worked on a number of projects that we have redeveloped. Racer's good about dealing with the environmental issues that existed from the properties they took. There's the bad assets, and then there's good GM, old GM. Old GM, they kind of handpicked. Like I'm working on an old Cadillac stamping plant that's from the 20s. Somehow that's not in Racer, and it's not in GM, and it's a cesspool. It's got like potentially 18 underground tanks. It's never had anything done on it. It's got asbestos literally, falling from the ceiling is all over the floor, and I have no recourse against anyone. Pretty sure Cadillac is part of GM, and it should be in Racer, but I don't know how they pick and choose it. But I know all the Racer folks. I think they're pretty good to work with. I've got a couple sites that they've had quite a bit of work done on that now PFAS is an issue, and they've already acknowledged that they will evaluate and take care of anything with respect to that. And you had a question in the back there in the corner earlier? You getting shy? I thought I saw you raise your hand. I must have answered it. Okay, so this is a non-core. This is Troy, Michigan. This is a Kmart. It's clearly blighted. It's abandoned. And it's functionally obsolete. And it has one of those auto care centers, so it had a waste oil tank, and there's a little bit of contamination. We ended up about $500,000 of reimbursable expense on this. Very little of that was soil removal. It was primarily asbestos abatement and demolition. And these are big stores. This was supposedly the second Kmart that ever operated, urban legend. It's in Troy, right by their headquarters. It's at Maple and Livernois. This is what it looks like today. Isn't that cool? This is how the math looked. That Kmart was being valued at $1 million for taxes, which seems pretty high for just a vacant, ugly old Kmart. Once they built the new theater, it went up to $4.5 million, and this increment generated $65,000 in new taxes. So it took 8 years for the developer to recover their $500,000. The city still got their base value. And then once the 8 years is up, the city gets all the new value. So it's really kind of a win-win if you look at it correctly, but some communities just feel they shouldn't have to give any incentive at all. most are pretty on board for it. I've done a lot of communities that have never done one of these, and you gotta kind of hold their hand. I did one in Riverview, downriver, and I thought it was gonna be so difficult, and it ended up taking 2 meetings and literally, I think, 20 hours, and we procured over $320,000. So there's some, always doesn't hurt to ask, right? This is an example of 2 functional obsoletes. This is an old Catholic K through 8 in Royal Oak. These are great because the base value is 0. So this went from 0 to a Kroger Marketplace worth like $10 million. All they would cover is asbestos abatement, which was $321,000. So they got all their money back in the 2nd year because the increment was so huge. And the city never lost, well, they never had a base, but now they're collecting all those new taxes. So if you look at it right as a municipality, it's a great catalyst to inspire development and generate more property taxes. And a lot of these also encourage other development around it. You know, you build a huge Kroger like this, now there's a credit union out front, there's all these outlots. This is Dürr Automotive's headquarters in Southfield. This is a core community, so we were able to get all the site prep costs. Neither of these sites did we ever drill a boring at because there were no concerns. The phase ones had no concerns. They were both built on virgin land and never used chemicals. This was 4.89 million. This did have a lot of asbestos in it, but over 4 million of this was all site preparation. They added 100,000 square feet. It's a 40-acre campus, 500 employees consolidated here, so almost all of that was, 4 million that would have, they would have incurred if they built out in Oakland Township on raw land. This is a transformational brownfield. This is the one that Gilbert's using for the Hudson's building. I'm not going to get into it because it's designed to apply to virtually no one unless you're a multi-billionaire. But if you do have any properties that,
Sorry, we might have some of those.
well, okay, let's join hands and wallets.
Yeah.
So basically, if your population of your city is in one of these ranges and you have a development in this range, you could go for this program.
Can you go back to that for a second?
Oops. Yes, there.
Yeah.
So like the city of Pontiac falls in this range. I had one that might apply, and it's kind of unknown. It's only been done twice in the state. It's one of those things you can spend 200 grand to find out you're going to get nothing. So we like to be able to say, I can do a little bit of homework and say I'm going to get you a couple $100,000, and then you can spend some money.
So if you are a nonprofit that owns real estate, and your tax base is 0, what is the incentive, I guess? Create an LLC so that the tax base
There is none.
has an increment
You're better off not paying taxes.
and not getting the incentive.
Yeah, there's
Raising
no-
the money.
Paying no taxes is always the best option. If you have to pay
Just wanted to
taxes,
clarify your look.
yeah, it's, I've tried every way to skin the cat a different way to make it work for nonprofits. Now, you can use some of those other funds, like the Refined Petroleum Fund, that's not TIF related, but TIF just doesn't work for nonprofit. Okay, well, there's MEZs. These are developments where you can offset and subsidize income tax in certain regions. There's a lot of these set up in Detroit. It's not really an environmental thing, but we do it for a lot of our clients because it falls in with doing a number of other incentives. CRP, Michigan Community Revitalization Program. If you remember, they had the Brownfield program. If you work in real estate, Snyder was accused of getting rid of the Brownfield tax credit. He got rid of the single business tax, and the Brownfield credit was a credit against the SPT. So when they got rid of the SPT, which I was pretty happy about, they replaced it with this program, which is essentially the exact same thing. They just renamed it. Which they should have just called it the same thing, so I didn't get accused of mixing incentive. It's up to $1.5 million in a grant in government code word means just a check, free money. Then you can also get loans, which we have bankers sponsoring this event, so we don't want to suggest a loan that's more competitive than you could ever get in the marketplace, but they are pretty lucrative loans if you're really in a tight situation with your funding. They like you to have all these good things, be downtown, mixed use, create jobs, increase density. You know, they like walkable communities, all the good stuff that, you know, makes you feel good. That makes you feel good. These are some of the, you know, getting into the nuts and bolts of how you need to qualify. And this is a great example. This is Avenue of Fashion. This is the old B. Siegel at 7 in Livernois. And it now looks like this. It's an $8 million development. We were able to get $3.25 million, 1.3 through their community revitalization program. So they got a grant up front, and then 1.17 in TIF. So the ROI on incentives alone is almost 31%. That's pretty powerful. And but would you invest if you had $8 million? This on the corner of 7? But this has been a great catalyst. We've got engaged on like 5 projects, all within an eighth of a mile of this since this occurred. UAD Mercy is just a mile down the road, and they're doing a huge campus expansion. And UAD Jesuit, the high school, is just down the road this way. And this whole corridor is it's all been repaved. This is the area the city and Doug, I don't know if you mentioned this last night. I didn't watch the state of the county or city. They're sick of Corktown, downtown, you know, Midtown and Eastern Market and all the love. So they really want to focus in these neighborhoods kind of outside the beaten path, which I think is smart. Being a lifelong resident of the area, not Detroit. This is another one we did in Lansing. It was an old auto repair right downtown. We were able to get $4.3 million in TIF, another 3.75 in grants and loans and just money galore. This is the new concept that Meyer's doing, where they're doing the urban markets that are a smaller footprint. They're looking to do one on Jefferson, and there's one that just went in Royal Oak, which I'll talk about in a second, but this is a cool concept. They're not calling it Meyer's, but there's Meyer products inside. Well, for my TCF friends in the room, this is where your new headquarters is going to be, in Detroit. And we were able to procure a $12.7 million property tax abatement, so their taxes are frozen before they put a $100 million building up, and $17 million in tax increment financing to deal with asbestos, demolition, a bunch of other stuff. So that's a great, this is the rendering that says Chemical Bank. You guys can't make up your mind what you want to be, but I don't have any renderings that show it as TCF, but so just pretend that says TCF up there. This is one in Plymouth that was Bathy Manufacturing. Manufacturer went out of business in the 80s, so it's a legacy site. This is Pulte Homes' first development that they're going to do on an industrial site that will have a deed restriction. So when people buy their townhouse for $350,000, they're going to get paperwork that says this is a brownfield redeveloped site, it has a vapor barrier, and it needs to be maintained, and here's for your information. Very conservative home builder, publicly traded. It took them a long time to get in their mindset that this is the future. If anything, it could be a plus. You know, the young generation, you know, they might pick, well, this is a repurposed property over this green space. I feel good about this. I don't care if there's a vapor barrier, I'm safe. So, $1 million, when they first passed Renew Michigan, they immediately gave $1 million from that fund to this project because they really wanted to show that they were going to put it to work. I thought it was stupid. They already had a plan approved, and Pulte's kind of got deep pockets, but they also did that on that Meyer too, which is, again, you get my point. And then there's another $2 million in TIF, so that's over $3 million. This is already under construction. I'm guessing they'll probably have some of these complete by the end of summer. That's the renderings. I gotta get some real pictures and see what they look like. It might just look like 2x4s now. So this is the other, it's called Woodward Corners Market. This is 13 in Woodward. It's an old Beaumont Center. This is called Woodward Corners Market, and it's the Meyer concept in Royal Oak. There's another one in Grand Rapids called Grand River Market. So at each market, they're having an identity with their community, which I think is kind of cool. So this was $3.7 million in brownfield TIF, and this is actually up and running, and I actually went and worked at that Woodward Myers, or the Woodward Corner Gardens. There's a coffee shop in there. It's super cool. It's got overhead doors all around it, so in the summer, doors open, produce, coffee tables. There's no booze, but you can buy it there. This is another one in Birmingham that was 2.6 million. It looks like this now. Fort Wixom plant loaded with PFAS. Because of PFAS, we ended up, we resurrected an old Ford brownfield credit for like $12.5 million, or no, it was $12 million in MBT credits that we got converted into cash. So almost $25 million, and the PFAS expense in this alone is going to exceed $500,000. And that's just to pre-treat it, to send it to the wastewater treatment plant. Everybody thinks the Fort Wixom plant is long gone and is totally redeveloped, because if you drive by 96, you see a Duluth Trading, you see a General RV Center, you see a Menards. That's only probably 20% of the original property. There's over 100 acres still remaining, and it is now under construction to be a bunch of logistics, warehousing, manufacturing. $150 million, 500 to 1,000 jobs. That's the way to put tax dollars to work. And I'm no fan of corporate welfare. WAFA's in the house with Wayne County, so they have a $600,000 grant that's going to be able to be put to work in, when? A week? 2 weeks?
March 1st.
So if you have any projects in Wayne County that have some type of environmental concern, a lot of times if you email us an address, we'll do a little homework to see if there's any reason to believe it's contaminated. If it's Lapida's getting bought by another person to operate it as Lapida and it's got no environmental issues, you can't use the grant. It has to have some type of environmental issue. It's determined to mitigate or alleviate stigma because of environmental, and then once this is subsidized, it gets someone comfortable to redevelopment. They do these grants all over the country. There's other ones in Genesee County, Lansing Economic Area Partnership, Oakland County's tapped, but we just wrote another grant for them that maybe we'll find out in the fall or the spring. These are all the thumb counties where virtually zero economic activity occurs, but there's a bunch of money up there too. And it'll cover all these things that are the usual suspects of transactional due diligence. These are other grants we manage. There's another one, there's a couple in West Michigan. There's like $70 million per year across the country that's available. It's very competitive. Only 1 in 5 grants get selected, and Wayne County was successful in getting their $600,000, which is great to hear. We plan to hopefully put it to work. It's got to be a good project. If it's a gas station that's going to be turned into a flower shop and create 3 jobs, would you support that?
Probably not.
Probably
Maybe.
not. That's a maybe.
Well,
Depends on the
maybe gas
flowers.
station we might, but
And they probably have 5 employees. At least they repurpose. They got to put some money into it to make it look pretty.
depends on the community.
Where am I at? These are tax abatements. Again, this is the 12 million I mentioned with TCF Bank, where you can freeze the taxes. Again, no taxes is better than getting taxes back. This is just a summary of all the different funds. It's over $130 million every year, so that's good. Why does this matter to members of the chamber? I mean, how can this not be valuable to either something you're involved with your organization, or a client or someone that you're advising, to make them aware of these dollars? We procured over $120 million last year, and I would say 80% of that, we educated the client about the availability of these funds. The state doesn't do it, the city doesn't do it. City of Dearborn, if someone comes and says they're gonna invest $10 million and asks you for no money, even if it's contaminated, are you gonna offer this? I wouldn't if I were you. If they're not asking for it, why give it up? But some communities are more proactive. And then this is my marketing department, where they try to show how we're just made business together. Although I did know we both were founded in '92, so that's kind of interesting. I clearly did not read this before. And then these are just, these are contracts we hold with Eagle to access these funds. For every dollar spent on our economic incentive team in 2019, we returned $296. So we have an incentive group to get the money so that we can do the environmental work, which is our passion. I like giving people money, that's kind of a good passion too. And then this is just our propaganda. We've got a bunch of locations in Michigan, we've got a bunch of locations in the Mid-South. This was our first brownfield we did in Lansing in '94, that was our headquarters. This is my Berkeley office we did in 2008. I had brownfield TIF for like $125,000. on a $700,000 project. This was during the recession, and somehow they forgot to ever reassess my building after I put a lot of money into it. So I'd rather not, I'm not gonna tell them you should raise my taxes so I can get them back. So I'm just I'm laying low. This is how we rank in Michigan. We're the #1 due diligence provider on volume of due diligence. We're not the cheapest, we're not the fastest, so to do that significant volume, to me, it's a testament of quality. That's how we rank nationally. We work with every credit union who are getting very heavy into commercial lending. The community banks, the Wall Street banks, and then these are just all petroleum clients we have. Some of them are usual suspects around here, like Armada, Safadine, private equity, developers, REITs, healthcare. Why working with us makes sense? If you don't get that by now, at least I didn't buy lunch. And that's it. Any questions? I'm glad we had some good questions along the way. Yes? First of all, who are you at?
I'm Kathleen Francois. My company is a PR and media company called
Okay.
Greening Detroit, and we
Okay.
expanded to greeningmichigan.com.
Oh, okay.
Did I see Berkeley?
Yes.
I think I've actually passed by you. I'm not very far away in Southfield.
Okay.
But my question is, with hemp and sunflowers, we've heard a lot that growing hemp and sunflowers in brownfields helps leach the contamination right out of the soil. Have you worked with any of that, or have you heard of any of that?
I can't say I'm an expert on that, but there's all kinds of these urban legends and science myths that, to me, if anything's growing, it's generally some of the most contaminated sites I work on. There's green grass and trees with leaves. It must not be all that bad, so I'm a little cynical and a little biased. I think these regulations are far too onerous. I don't condone dumping or polluting, but I just think for legacy issues, we spend a heck of a lot of money. Asbestos in schools, if you just leave it alone, it's not gonna hurt anything. And, back when we had books, we had books that were 20 years old, and we're spending money on taking felt paper underneath the gym floor out for $100 grand because it's got asbestos in it. What a waste of money, So I can't speak to that. I'm sure that it is in fact true. A lot of these things naturally break down, but I'm not an expert on that. Anyone else? Yes?
What's the average cost of phase one?
Well, you could probably find some people that'll do it for $1,200 to $1,400. A real firm will be about $2,200 to $2,400. A very expensive firm would be like $3,500. And there's plenty that'll do them for $1,800 to $2,000. If that's all you care about is price, don't call us. But if you care about getting great work and a lot of solutions, thinking outside the box, that's where we shine. All right, well, very comprehensive set of questions. Sometimes I give this to groups and I don't get one question, I get deer in the headlights. So thanks, and thanks again, Faye, for letting me speak to your audience.
Thank you all of you for coming today. We look forward to seeing you at the next luncheon, which will probably be in the springtime. And one of the topics that we're looking at is all the new insurance rules that are kind of coming out from the state of Michigan and how they're going to be impacting business. If you have any other suggestions or recommendations, give me a call. I know all of you have my number, especially Wally. So give me a call, but if you have any other questions or if you need anything, don't ever hesitate. And I strongly encourage all of you to reach out to Mike with any questions or anything that, any referrals or anything like that. All right, thank you.